In this video, we're going to do the Section 2.1 activity, the price, demand, and revenue problem. Before we get to that problem, we're going to go over some formulas here. These are functions. They're written in function notation, which is where we have parentheses here around the input variable. And remember, this does not mean c times x. This means that we are plugging in for x. X is the variable that we plug in for. And our first function is the cost function. So we talked about this before. The cost function is fixed costs plus variable costs. We have our fixed cost, which is a number not multiplied by x, and our variable cost is multiplied by x. Our next function is the price demand function. The price demand function, we use a small p here for price. We use capital P for profit. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. The price demand function, m minus n times x. All these a, b, m, n, those are all going to be numbers, and x is going to be the variable that you're plugging in for. So for the price demand function, we plug in x, which is number of products. So I'll make a note of that. And the price demand function, what comes out of that is the price. Or the y variable, in other words, is the price. Our revenue function, we also talked about earlier, is price times the number of products. Number of items sold times price per item. When we talked about this before, we talked about it using a constant price. So they know that they're selling the product for whatever price, and you just multiply that by the number of products. This time, we're going to use our price demand function for the price. So our price is no longer going to be a constant. It's going to be a function itself. So we're plugging in for p. We are substituting m minus n times x. So these p and x here are kind of switching places. X is going to the beginning, and then p, we're replacing p with m minus n times x. So that's going to give us our revenue function, and we're going to see what that looks like here through these activities. Finally, we have our profit function. As we talked about earlier, profit equals revenue minus costs. So we would take our revenue function and subtract our cost function. So we have a problem here with a manufacturer of cameras, and they have price demand data. P is the price per camera at which X million cameras are sold. Notice that as price goes down, the number sold goes up. So as something gets cheaper, people are going to be more likely to buy it because it's a good deal. And so we are able to sell more of the cameras in this case. So using regression analysis, which we talked about before, we have this price demand function, or this linear equation, to model the data in the table. So this is our function here, p of x equals 94.8 minus 5x. So the first problem is asking us in the graphing calculator in Desmos, create a table containing the data in table 1, and then enter the price demand function given above. So I've already done that here, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. So hopefully you're kind of getting good at using Desmos for these types of problems. Remember, to enter a table, you click on the plus sign, and then you can add a table to a row. For the equation, I just typed this in. I used y and x, and y instead of p. And then if I want to change so that these are the same colors, I click on the wheel, and then I can click on these circles to change the colors of either the points, the line, or both. So this is what the graph should look like. I set the zoom here. Yours might look slightly differently depending on how you have the window and the zoom set, but this is kind of the idea of what it should look like. And then to insert it in your notes, click Share Graph and either use the share link or export image. So you should be doing that for number 1, and then we'll move on to question number 2. What is the company's revenue function for this camera? So we have our price demand function here, and we know that revenue is equal to x times the price demand function. So to write the revenue function, I'm just going to write that r of x equals x times 94.8 minus 5x. Now, this is an okay way to write the function. I may want to multiply this out, so I would do that by distributing here. That's going to be useful in a little while. But if I multiply this out, I get r of x equals 94.8x minus 5x squared. And so as you can see, we have x squared in our revenue function, which means that it's going to be quadratic. It's not going to be a linear function or a line, it's going to be a parabola when we graph it. So, question 3, we're first completing the table, and then we are going to graph the revenue function here. So the instructions say to use the scientific calculator on Desmos.com. So I will switch back to this. So I can use either version of the function that I have written, the one with parentheses or the one where I have it multiplied out. They're probably equally easy. But I'm going to start by plugging in 1 for x. So I'll use the bottom one here, 94.8 times x minus 5 times x squared. And I can use the squared key here on the calculator. And I get that answer of 89.8, and it says to round to the nearest whole number, which is why it says 90 in the table. So now I'm going to go through and plug in the other numbers. And again, this is where the Desmos calculator is really nice because all I need to do is change the numbers here and I get different values. So when I plug in 3, I get 239. So I can type that in. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but I'll just fill them in so you can check your answers, make sure they're correct. I should get 389 when I plug in 6. I should get 448. When I plug in 9, I should get 418 when I plug in 12, and 297. So you can see that it goes up, reaches some kind of maximum point, and then starts decreasing. And that's what happens when we have a price. We're using a price demand function for the price instead of just a constant price. So that's what my table looks like, and then for question 4, I want to add that to the graph. So I'm going to go back to my calculator and show you what that looks like. Again, I already have it typed in. I had to change my viewing window a little bit so that you could see the whole parabola, but this is what that looks like. So I have my original points and then the line, and then I entered the table that we just created and my revenue equation here. I typed it out with the x squared. To get the squared here, what you would do is you would use the caret key on your keyboard. So if you hit Shift and 6, you can make a squared. So I'll take that off and then hit Shift 6. That goes to the exponent, and I can type the exponent in. So that's what my graph should look like, and now I can paste the link or paste the graph into my notes.